Yeah, so how I remember the story is I was in college, I was going to BC at the time. You go to parties, you go to this stuff, and there just happened to be a bar that was opening, like a grand opening, and everybody had fake IDs or whatever. So we walk in, and and I was like, wow, like this is crazy. Like you can't even walk around. This is not even any fun.
So about 25 years ago, my friends and I, and along with my brother, went out to a bar in Bakersfield. My brother was underage, and I was just about 21, 22 years old at the time. So upon arriving at the bar, which was downtown, arriving there, there's different people from different sides of town, and I noticed my brother. Somebody looking at my brother from across the bar, and I could tell my brother was getting agitated from it. And so he starts talking to me. He's like, "Hey, Eddie, there's somebody looking at me, and it's making me upset." And I'm like, "Just leave it alone. It's okay." It was getting crowded in there. It was getting tense inside the room in the bar. So I took a step outside.
Something happened inside where people were just. It was kind of like chaotic for a second. There must have been. I think what had happened is a fight had happened inside. I was like, we better get out of here. And there was kind of some commotion going on, and some people running around, and security guards screaming happening. And so we just literally walked across the street, and I could see my truck. And I remember just, for some reason, I heard just bottles fly by, and they hit the ground, and I was like, what the heck? And I turned around, and there were people that were coming towards us. And I looked over, and a guy that I grew up with, Chris, was like kind of like hiding behind my truck. And I went to tell Chris, like, hey, don't run, we're going to be okay. We have so many friends inside. It's not going to matter what's going to happen. It's going to be whatever. And I turn around and he's running. So I just immediately catch up to him. And why I even ran is bizarre.
After a few minutes, I heard he hit your brother. He's running away. I look forward and I see my friends chasing somebody.
We run and we cut around the back of this building, and I turn and take to break off to the right, and there's a little patch of grass, and I slip in that patch of grass. And I remember trying to gather my balance, and somebody tackled me, and I remember thinking, all right, just curl up tight and do a ball, and you're gonna be all right.
Upon turning the corner, arriving there, there's my brother along with three or four other guys. They had the young man on the floor, and they're hitting him. One got a pool stick. I can remember that vividly. Another my friend of mine was kicking him, and I see my brother over him punching him.
I remember somebody saying, back up, back up, back up. I'll never forget that. And I remember just like tightening up as tight as I could tighten. I'm thinking, they're gonna shoot me. I'm dead. And somebody would come in and kick me in the head. And then I remember it just being wet. Like I remember just being wet. And I remember it was just like as if rain was falling. And I remember thinking to myself, man, this is it. Like I can't take much more of this. My just shutting down. And finally somebody kicked me, and at that point, the last time my eardrums popped. And I remember it was just like the sound you hear flatline. It was like
from a distance I could hear police, I could hear just loud noises happening. So I'm like, we gotta get going, the police are coming, let's go. And once I see my brother there, he's like, Eddie, I hurt my hand, and we're like, what happened? And I looked down at his hand, and he had cut it. I'm like, how'd you cut your hand? And he's like, I had broke a bottle, and I was hitting the guy with the bottle, cutting him. And so I'm like, holy smokes, we gotta get you to the hospital. Upon arriving to the hospital, we're in the waiting room and look over the corridor, and we see friends of the subject that we hurt. And we see them talking to policemen, and they're kind of pointing their finger at us like, I had to go to court. I pled guilty. To some charges, because if I went to jury, I was looking at 20 years in prison, and I'm like, I can't do 20 years in prison. So I took a plea. But my brother, who did actually injure the gentleman, Ben Reese is his name, he did 5.5 years in jail. And my brother lost a lot of his younger years in life.
And then I think a couple days later, I woke up. From that point, I remember, I think I stayed there for, I don't know, maybe 8 or 10 days. And then they took me, they were like, hey, you're going to be okay. So you should be able to go home and start, it's going to be a long process to be able to rehab, to be able to ever write again, to be able to ever use your hands again, to be able to do anything again for a long time. And you just build this crazy feeling up of like, dude, I cannot wait to pay these guys back. I'm just thinking like, I'm gonna kill these guys. Like, I'm fully going to pay these guys back. And I'm thinking every day is this thing. Like, it was actually the crazy motivator for me to like, I'm getting my hands back. I'm getting this back. Find out where these guys are, and that's what's gonna happen.
Fast forward, my wife and I, we got into real estate. The early years of my marriage, or actually a lot of my marriage, I wasn't a great husband at all. I was a great provider, great dad, and I pretend to be a great husband, but there was a lot of things that I was doing on the side. I found myself divorced. I was ashamed of what I had done, and too prideful, and I couldn't humble myself to speak of it to anybody, including my family. And found myself in a very dark spot. I never forget, one morning, I had a friend of mine named Jeff Kirby, an acquaintance of mine at the time. He's a good friend now. He approached me at the gym and said, "Hey, Eddie, you still selling real estate?" And I said, yeah, of course. Once again, put on this face like, yeah, I'm still selling real estate. He's like, well, I'm looking to sell my property. You think maybe you can sell my house? And I'm like, yeah, of course I can sell your house, Jeff. I said, well, Jeff, I'll pray for you. And which, up to that point, I'm in my late 30s, I had not prayed for myself. And so I said that, out of just saying that. But he turns around and looks at me, he's like, Eddie, are you a Christian? So he's like, oh, I'm so embarrassed that I haven't asked you to men's group. We meet every Friday at 6 a.m. And internally I'm thinking, oh, great. But out of obligation, I feel like, well, he gave me his business, I better show up, So Friday morning, I show up. There's a gentleman on stage, he runs on stage, his name's Les Piercy. He runs on there, and I'm like, oh, that's the guy from the TV. I remember him from TV. I grew up in Lamont. He had a store down the street from me, and he asked, he's like, is anybody new here? Anybody new show up today? And I'm like, raise my hand. And he's like, you, come with me. So we go to a private setting. I'll never forget this because I felt odd to begin with that I was there. And as soon as they finished praying, this gentleman who's sitting across the table starts speaking of his divorce. And he gets emotional. He's in his late 50s at this time. And he starts talking about the hurts and what he's going through, what he's dealing with. And everything that he's talking about is stuff that I had obviously felt, everything I can relate. But I had never spoke about it, never spoke of it. And so I just started bawling for the first time in years, with that situation that I'd been in, my divorce. I just felt, oh my God, it just felt good to cry. And I'm just there soaking it all in. And he's like, well, they're wrapping it up. I'm thinking, let's continue. I was actually excited to be there. Like, this is pretty cool. I couldn't wait. I'm like, well, when do you guys meet again? Next Friday? I couldn't wait for the next Friday. I was super excited for next Friday.
My father and my Uncle Paul always had told me that to go to Montana. We loved to hunt and fish, and that was the place. They had never been there, but they had sold me that was the place to ever go. The life of wanting to like kill Eddie and his brother, and these things just like kind of, they never went away. But my life, I was like, man, I gotta get out of this. I gotta get out of Bakersfield. This is bad. I go to Montana and start my life. I go to school there, but my life is constantly in turmoil. It's constant stuff. My cousin Collins was starting to go to church and go to these Bible groups. I really didn't know much about it, but I had a pheasant hunting trip we were going on, and so people canceled, and I was talking to Collins one day in passing. He lived here in Bakersfield, and I was still in Montana, and I said, hey, he said, hey, I think I got some guys that would want to go on that. And I was like, great, cool, and I remember there was a person there, and we're kind of getting everything set up for the day before, and I was like, hey man, what's going on? And this guy says, man, do you know much about these guys that are coming? And I'm like, no, what are you talking about? Dude, these guys are crazy Christians, dude. Bible thumpers. They just, and I was like, what? Like, what are you talking about? And he's like, oh, dude, these guys, it's big time, and I'm like, what? I'm thinking to myself, what have I got myself into? This is so not me. And what is this? Sure enough, Les and his crew show up of Bible thumpers, I would say. And I go to this journey group, and I remember I was listening. It was an overnight deal, and we were at this ranch, and all these guys are telling their stories of their struggles. Then that morning, Les is like, "Hey, it's your turn to go," and I'm like, okay, just give them a, give them some of their stuff, because even though you've never done some of that stuff, I started to talk, and then I just remember saying everything I've ever done, and it wasn't what any of them did or said to me But it was in that moment that I was like, dude, I'm free. There's no more darkness. I remember early, I would be like, God, why did you even let me get to this point? Like, you could have taken me off this earth a long time ago for what I did to your people. Like, how I hurt. Like, I don't even know why you would forgive me. They say you do. Your word, I read it. But why? Like, how? Like, who? What is this? And man, I just so in love with God. So in love with, like what he does. And I remember I'm still finishing stuff up in Montana because I've messed everything up there completely, just ruined everything I've ever touched. I'm actually going to move back to Bakersfield at the time. I'm actually transitioning already to come back to Bakersfield. Les says to me, let's co-lead with me, and he sends a list to all of us of all these people. And I remember seeing a name on the list, a guy named Eddie, and I remember going, calling Les and be like, hey, who's this guy Eddie? I recognize the name. He's like, I don't know, man. He said, these people just sign up, and we just, we put them on a list.
So we had taken a break, so we get this roster for the new season, and I'm looking at the roster, and there's a lot of names on there, and I see the name Ben Reese, and I'm like, Ben Reese? What could it be? And it said he's from Montana. I'm like, oh, it can't be him. He's from Montana. So I'm looking across. I'm like, could it be? And you gotta remember, 18 years had passed. And I'm like, it was night whenever it was dark whenever everything took place. And I'm like, I just couldn't. No, I'm like, no, it's not him. It's not him.
And then I thought to myself, wow, I do know this guy. I recognize this name. There's no way. There's just no way. I was like so anxious. Like, I don't even know why I was anxious to ask him. But the time couldn't go any slower during the journey group.
So we went through our session, wrapped it up, and I'm getting my Bible and get my stuff put together. And when I look up, I see him coming towards me.
I say, hey, Eddie, can I talk to you? And
he goes, you Eddie Resendez? And it took a second for me to be like, yeah, I'm Eddie Resendez. And then he said, where are you from?
He said, I grew up in Lamont. But it was just, he just wouldn't look at me. He just kept looking down.
As soon as he said where you're from, for some reason, when I'm asked that, I'm like, oh, there's meaning to that when you're where you're from.
And I just my heart kept wanting to just jump out of my skin. I felt like, and I was like, this is it. This is him. And I said, hey, you got a brother? And he's like, yeah, my brother Gabriel. Do you know him? And I said, yeah, I know your brother. And he looks up at me. He says, it's you, Ben. It's you.
And instantly, I'm like, I said, you're Ben Reese. He's like, I'm Ben Reese.
And I said, yeah, Eddie, it's me, man. And I wanted to say the first words to him, and he said, man, the last time I remember seeing you is we just left you in an alley in a pool of blood for dead, man.
And the first thing he says to me is like, man, I'm looking forward to meeting you and hoping to meet your brother.
I said, man, Eddie, it was a long time ago, dude, when you and your brother did that to me. But you're forgiven. And dude, life goes on from this point.
And I'm just overwhelmed with I'm just thinking, what the heck? It's just I'm just getting this numbness over me, or just lost of words. And I'm like looking at him like, what?
The craziest part is I wanted to kill this guy and his brother, but to see those thoughts have never reigned in my head, ever, since the moment I met him, the moment I read his name on that list. All those years, that thought never came into my mind. All my thought was I just want to forgive this guy. I want to forgive this guy.
And I was kind of I was just thinking, what the heck just took place right now? And so I walked out and I called my mom, I called my sister, and I called everybody. I'm like, you don't believe who I met right now. And you don't believe what he told me, that he forgave me, he forgives me, and he loves me.
Well, how can you take something from one spot and 15 years later put two guys in one thing? There's no coincidence with the Lord. He's just that powerful, and then put you both in a group at a church.
And never forget the opportunity that I had to bring my brother to meet him, and my dad to meet him at M24. And I got a chance to introduce them and to see Ben and my brother, shake hands and then hug. And so it's been really neat. It's been really, really neat to be able to share life, at a whole different level with Ben and his family. And
I think how big God is, and his plan was so impeccable with this thing that one day that Eddie and I would do this and become friends, and our families would be be friends, and we would hang out, and they would watch our dog when we go out of town, and love on us, and that God took such pain, such tragedy, such loss. I say this to people, I've never seen God's face, and I've never heard his voice. But man, I have seen his power, like power beyond no avail.